So Black Panther Wakanda Forever is now out on Disney+, and because of this I thought I'd revisit the movie to point out some of the best Easter eggs, hidden details, and things you missed in it. These are things I haven't seen pointed out in other videos, and there's some of the smallest details in the movie that you might have missed when watching it. Now the film centers around Shuri taking up the mantle of the Black Panther in the wake of her brother T'Challa's death. Chadwick Boseman's passing left a big hole in the franchise, and the actor's real-life death influenced the film in several ways. Beyond the obvious plot points, the creative team left a tribute to the actor in the movie, and this happens when Everett Ross is sprung from the prison transport. As he's being driven along the road, we can make out the license plate, and this reads CB112976. The CB actually stands for Chadwick Boseman, with the numbers representing his birthday on the 29th of November 1976. Now the idea of grief is laced throughout the film, and it's actually a major part of Phase 4. Wanda had to deal with the loss of her children and Vision, Black Widow ended with Yelena grieving Natasha, Shang-Chi was changed by the loss of his mother, and No Way Home deals with the death of Aunt May.
Spoiler alert.
Two characters you might not think are similar though are Gorr and Shuri. In the opening of the movie we watch her praying to Bast to save her brother, and this is similar to Gorr praying to his god to save his daughter. Neither of these prayers are answered, and thus both become angry and bitter for some time. Bast, of course, also appeared in Love and Thunder during the God scene, and alongside them we saw the Mayan God Ketzo-kotal. Now it's devastating that Shuri couldn't be with her brother in his final moments, as she was trying to save him rather than accepting his fate. Now Shuri has always been more science-based rather than believing in gods and religion. In the comics this actually had a lot of repercussions, and during Black Panther issue 4 from 2009, she was denied the mantle because of her arrogance. When Shuri's mother Ramonda is killed, this pushes her further down a path of anger, and both this side and her arrogance are why she meets Killmonger on the ancestral plane. This also happens in the throne room, which is of course also where her mother died. She even begins where Ramonda was, submerged in the water just beside the platform. Now he watches this as set on fire, mirroring the burning of the herb god in the first Black Panther film. However, it has a deeper meaning, as Shuri says,
"It won't be these clothes I'll burn. It'll be the world. Everyone in it."
In the scene, we can also see Shuri wearing her funeral robes, showing how this idea has carried across to this moment. Now come the end of the film, we watch as her mind races and reverses the war to the point that she sees her mother. This is who the character actually wanted to see on the ancestral plane, and this finally gives her the wisdom of her ancestors to stop this self-destructive cycle. Now upon gaining her powers, she hits a mannequin across the room, and this is something that her brother did in the first movie when visiting her lab. Like Shuri, in the comics, Killmonger actually made a synthetic herb, which further pushed him down the road of taking the secretive power of Wakanda and using it elsewhere. He eventually gave this to Kevin Cole, and the character ended up becoming the White Tiger. Now in this opening scene, we can hear Shuri's AI, who's voiced by Trevor Noah. Though this AI appeared in the first movie, it's clearly had some upgrades, and in Infinity War, Shuri was able to map Vision's brain when trying to remove the Mind Stone. I think she's applied some of this to her own technology, and the visualization of the AI itself is even yellow just like the Mind Stone is. The AI is named Griot, and this is named after a West African storyteller which Shuri actually met in the comics when visiting the ancestral plane. Now Shuri ends up holding the helmet in front of her at one point, and this is actually a nod to Shuri issue 2 from 2018. Now the funeral procession sees everyone wearing white, and the first Black Panther movie was coming hot off the back of Civil War, in which the king died, and we actually saw this reflected in the film. When T'Challa returned to the kingdom, we saw both his mother and sister wearing white, and this was because they were grieving for T'Chaka. Beside T'Challa's coffin, we can also catch his spear and shield, and these are what the character fought with during his trial in the first movie. Speaking of spears and shields, the Talocanians fight with them throughout the film, and at the end of the movie, we can see they use turtle shells as a defense. At the funeral, we see a mural for him, and the text around this reads, "The Panther King forever lives in us, he's now with the ancestors." Everyone does the Wakandan salute, and this actually means love in American Sign Language. The idea of crossing is even seen in the two ships that fly across the sky, and they create an X just behind the ship. Now they used T'Challa's helmet from Civil War, and this was picked for an important reason. T'Challa's arc in that revolved around him getting vengeance for his father's death, much like how Shuri does in this film. Both decide to not let vengeance consume them in the end, and this is a line that's echoed at the end of the film.
"Vengeance has consumed you. It's consuming them. I'm done letting it consume me."
Vengeance has consumed us. We cannot let it consume our people.
Now, Shuri wears face paint to create dots on her, and this is something that she also did in the previous movie when fighting against Killmonger. This later gets incorporated into her mask, and culturally, they were worn by the Suri tribe, which is also where the character's name originates from. At the funeral, you might also notice that there's statues of Bashenga along with his wife. Bashenga was the first Black Panther, and in front of the pair we can also catch two Panther statues. Gods and ancestry are laced throughout the film, and this is seen in several facets of the movie. Originally in the comics, Namor was Atlantean, however this was changed to Talocan so that the character wouldn't clash with DC's Aquaman. Talocan actually has roots in our own world, and Talocan with an L after the first T was believed to be a paradise by the Aztecs. They thought that those that died by drowning were absorbed by it, and it was ruled over the rain god Shaq, who gets mentioned by Namor later on. Now after the funeral and title sequence, we cut to the UN. We find out that France was attempting to take the vibranium, and they actually colonized parts of Haiti, where we learn Nakia has fled to. Here she's raised a son in secret, and we learn that he's actually going under the name Toussaint. Toussaint is actually named after a Haitian general called Toussaint Louverture, who fought against the French for independence. This thematically ties it back to this opening, and it's possible that Wakanda knew of this due to their spy network. In the first film, Killmonger said that they had spies in every nation across the globe, and they could have infiltrated the French government to learn of this attack. Now you might also catch Toussaint early on, and he's with the three children that go to Ramonda. Anyway, back at the UN, we also meet the US Secretary of State, played by Richard Schiff. We actually know who the president is at this point because of the cast listing for Secret Invasion, and he'll be called President Ritson. This name actually pops up later on in a news ticker, and we can see the text Ritson signs trade act with New Asgard. Now due to his role in Secret Invasion, I think he might end up becoming a Skrull, and this will be a big twist. We know that Harrison Ford is going to be taking over as Thaddeus Ross in the MCU, and in the Thunderbolts that he's going to be the president. That's just a bit of a Newton. But they do need to explain why there's a new president, and having one who's a general would make sense since the Skrulls pose such a security risk. Now early on we get another news ticker, and this talks about Scott Lang touring the book Look Out for the Little Guy. A reading of this is coming up in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, which will end up building off the back of this. Anyway, a war between the surface world and Talocan is started off with Namor and his forces attacking a US ship. This is shot almost like a horror movie, and it pulls a lot of iconography from the book Namor the Depths. In that he attacks a submarine and hunts divers in the dark, similar to what happens here when they carry out the expedition. Back in Wakanda we get several cool little Easter eggs, including a water drummer played by Jabari Exum. This guy is actually a movement coach that works for Marvel, and he helped to choreograph the fight scenes for this film and also the last one. Part of Jabari's training involved drumming away whilst actors carried out their moves in order to create a rhythm, and this is why they picked him to play a water drummer in the film. Now when Shuri's taken out by Ramonda, we can see elephants, and these animals have complex mourning rituals. The animals possess empathy, and they bury their dead and even hold funerals for the ones that they've lost, similar to the burning of the robes. After Namor shows up to Wakanda, they convene the council, and we see M'Baku walking in. He is eating a carrot, and in the first movie he said,
I'm kidding, we are vegetarians.
Now in that movie they didn't have a seat on the council, but now they do after T'Challa welcomed them down from the mountains. Here we learn this is all connected to Riri Williams, aka Ironheart, and though I'm a bit meh on her costume at the end, there is a nice little detail that they did in the final one. Her name is of course Ironheart, and they made it so that her shoulders make a heart symbol when she's wearing it. I actually love her first costume, and when she's ripping off the blueprints from her board, we can see the ones called the Mark I prototype. This initial flight is of course very similar to the one that Tony took in his Mark II, and there are moments in it that clearly riff on things Tony's done. Both scenes of them flying upwards, which causes issues with their ability to fly, and they both end with them crashing down to the ground. We even end up getting a similar scene at the end to the one in Infinity War when Tony blasts into the sky. Also, I love how Okoye calls the iPhone primitive.
Is that an iPhone I see?
Primitive.
Now speaking of crappy costumes, we get the Midnight Angels ones, but these are pretty comic book accurate, so don't kick off at me, I didn't like it back then either. Okoye ends up being stripped of her rank after that sweet fight scene on the bridge, and thus she ends up creating this group later on. In a nice bit of attention to detail, Ao ends up wearing gold in her armor for the rest of the movie because she's now the general in Okoye's place. Shuri is then captured and taken to Talocan, and this has lots of nods in it to Aztec culture. This includes a game Pesapalo, and this involves hitting a ball through a hoop, which we can see lining several structures. Another detail that you might notice here is that the Talocanians don't have blue skin. Upon reaching oxygen-rich environments, their skin colour changes just in the same way that blood goes from blue to red. Now at this point, Ramonda ends up going to Nakia and her war dog Bast is mentioned. In the comics, this was an intelligence agency used by Wakanda to scout the rest of the world. Killmonger's father was one of these, and this led him to his Oakland mission that started off the first movie. They used covert tactics, and this is why Nakia later dons a disguise, complete with a classic clock and glasses trick so that no one recognises her. Now if you're enjoying the video, we'd massively appreciate the thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for breakdowns like this every day. We also have a clips channel with smaller Easter eggs and highlights on movies and TV shows, and that'll be linked as the pinned comment. Spam over, and Namor shows Shuri a whole new world. You also see his artwork, and these paintings only exist on the land because he obviously can't paint underwater. Now one thing that you might not notice about the text and subtitles is that they're golden for Wakanda, whereas for the Talocanians they're always blue. The herb itself is also blue, and this leads the people into the water. Namor is a mutant, and much like the comics, he is one of the first. He learned this from Professor X originally, and he's represented both Atlantis and the mutants in the source material. Namor has built a gigantic empire, and later on he drops his catchphrase Imperious Rex. Now if you translate this from Latin, it means Empire King, and it's said as a war cry in the comics to anyone who dares to defy him. Nakia launches a rescue mission, and upon being picked up, we sees the group are pulled up into a ship through the use of a tractor beam. Now this is also how T'Challa's casket is lifted at the start of the movie. During the first Black Panther, T'Challa fell from a huge height and survived, and there is the potential that this tractor beam was used at this point to help slow his descent. Now due to Nakia killing some of his people, Namor launches an attack on Wakanda, and there's a really subtle moment that hints at this incoming assault. When Nakia is talking to Okoye, if you look at the ground under the archway, you can actually see that the water is slowly starting to come in. I love this little bit in the scene, and it foreshadows the big incoming attack. Now this pulls directly from the comics, and in the Avengers vs X-Men run, Namor ended up unleashing a tidal wave on the entire nation. Ramonda ends up dying, and she does this while saving Riri. Now whilst all this is going on, we have the US government in the background who are planning to go to war with Wakanda. Everett Ross says that it's a bad idea, and this is similar to Black Panther Volume 4 Issue 1. Eventually, Shuri gets a suit and shows up to the Jabari tribe. She comes in from the sky, and as she lands, we can see her legs getting a purple glow to them, which is the suit absorbing the kinetic energy of this impact. This is reflected in the fight with Namor, and every time he hits her, we see a flash of purple. Now the troops mount up, we get some great green screen, and it leads to all-out war on the ocean. Shuri creates hand cannons within the suit, and this is of course a callback to her doing it in the first film. Now as she skims along the side of the ship, you can see the sparks she's creating are so hot that they're burning blue instead of orange. This is because of the heat required to cut vibranium, and you know what, I think it's a really nice detail. Now Shuri ends up pretty much boiling Namor alive, and this is in order to evaporate the moisture within his body. She rips off one of his little chicken wings, but he stabs her with a spear, similar to how Killmonger was taken out in the prior movie. She breaks free though, and uses fire to take Namor out, which is of course the opposite element to water. This was foreshadowed in the throne room, with the water Namor brought in being an opposite to the fire Killmonger creates. Fire represents chaos, but Shuri manages to rein it in after seeing a vision of her mother. Namor sees a vision of his mother too, and we know that she loved the surface world, which is why he returned her body there upon her death. He's reminded that the surface isn't really his enemy, and that they can find common ground, which ends the battle. Now I have seen some confusion over the trial at the waterfall, but this does leave M'Baku as being the king. In the first movie we watched a ritual like this playing out, and T'Challa only had to defend the kingdom because he was challenged. As the challenge isn't met here, M'Baku gets to become the king, and hey, I'm down, give the man the throne. Now Shuri goes to burn her brother's robes, and as Ramonda said earlier in the film,
burning of the funeral garments marks the end of the mourning period and the beginning of a new relationship with our loved ones.
Now this new relationship with a loved one that has passed is of course represented in T'Challa's son. Shuri didn't know about him until now, but burning the robes creates a new relationship with her brother as she now gets to help raise his child. It's a sad and somber way to end the movie, and that closes out our Wakanda Forever breakdown. Hope you enjoyed it, and as I mentioned up top, this is just more of the obscure details and links to the comics that we haven't seen mentioned in other videos. If you want a scene-by-scene breakdown, then definitely go check out Ryan Airy's video on the movie, which, you know, come on guys, that was nice. I told you to go see Ryan Airy.
Shut the f*** up, Ryan Airy!
Damn me, Greg, man. Anyway, that's a video, and if you want something else to watch, then check out our breakdown of Thor, which will be linked on screen right now. Lots of cool little details in it that Jared goes through bit by bit, so definitely head over there right after this. But out of the way, thanks for sticking through the video. I've been Paul, I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.